It has officially been 1 year since the release of Romance by Fontaines DC. For those past 365 days, this album has continually met me where I was at. I've spent many days pissed off and working out to Death Kink, many drives screaming the words to In the Modern World, and having that slight lyrical change from seem so hard not to be free to seem so hard just to be, cutting deep every single time. It's the album I let play through 3 times on a road trip without noticing, and it's also the album that I had the privilege to see live from 3 rows back. For many months, this album has lived alongside me throughout so many different emotions. Happiness, sadness, anger, peace. And it did all that without me ever questioning what its intentions were. I can now see the way it prompted me to think about the ways that I look in the world, and then, because of that, how I will choose to live in the world. Before listening to the album, I never considered that there may be a difference between love and romance. I would have told you that the album in some sense was about unrequited love, but that would only scratch the surface. I would have told you that it was a damn good album, and that would still be true to this day. But I think the thing that surprised me the most when I read the lyrics of Romance Like a Novel was how dark and cynical they were. And maybe I shouldn't have been so surprised by this because the Fontaines have always had a gift of tackling complex emotions and experiences. But because sonically this album felt lighter than some of their past work, I was surprised. And quickly that duality of romance was revealed to me. Initially, when I think of the word romance, I think of rose petals and love letters. But I knew when the Fontaines announced the title of their album was going to be Romance, that I would not be taken out to a 5-course candlelit meal. I knew that they were going to package it in a different way. I just wasn't expecting it to show me that to romance your life is to alter your perception of it, which is true in both negative and positive ways. But I guess I learned quite fast how romance can be self-serving and selfish, and in many ways it's given in order to receive. Love, on the other hand, is selfless and uncontrollable, and that's the difference. This album has really inspired me to look more at what it means to look at the world with disappointment. As you get older, it's hard not to hate a lot of what you see happening around you, and as you grow even older, it's hard to feel like you have any control over changing that. I think the album Romance can be boiled down to 2 questions. Will you live romance by the world and naive to its ways? Or will you see it for all that it is and lose yourself to the bitterness of its truth? It is what Green sings and Carlos wrote on Hoarseness is the Whatness. You choose or you exist. But after writing this episode, I don't believe that either of those options are right. I think that those who have lost themselves to the lust of the world have not won, but those that have lost themselves to their hate of the world have also not won. The Fontaines, whether intentional or not, pose you with one of the most important questions we have to face in life, and I fear that they don't answer it for you. Who do we become in the face of pain? Today, I hope to expand on the conversation that the band begun and to follow in their footsteps by leaving you to be the one to answer the question yourself. Will someone find out what the word is that makes the world go round? 'Cause I thought it was love. But some say it has to be choice. I read it in some book or on an old packet of smokes. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of this album, it's important that we highlight the characterization that is found within its words. That way we can let ourselves fall into the story of the album and therefore the lessons that we can take from it. I'll be honest, when I went into this dissection, I wasn't expecting to come out with a story, but I was happily surprised when one started to appear within the words. To do this episode, I took it upon myself to take all the lyrics and put them in a PDF form and then put it on my Kobo so that I could read the words as a book. This was really important to me because I wanted to be able to take the album and separate it from the music and just hear what the words were trying to tell me on their own without being manipulated by the music. And I mean that in the highest form of respect, because a good musician knows how to use an instrument to make you feel a certain way. And it was just important to me that I was able to intake the words for what they were on their own. And my point in telling you this today is not to tell you that this is what the album is, because we don't know. There's only a few people on the earth that really know, and honestly, they might look you in the eyes and shrug their shoulders anyways. But this is a podcast where we like to talk about music. We like to talk about psychology, meaning, and how art can improve our lives. So we are going to talk about music and give it a meaning. With that all said, in going through the lyrics and letting myself follow the certain sparks that I saw, it led me to this natural characterization within the album. And what stuck out with me is that there seemed to be two opposing opinions within the album. One was choosing to see the world through your dreams and your ideals, or as Bono would say on Kendrick Lamar's XXX, you close your eyes to look around. And the other character almost had this omniscient, judgmental stance on them. And that's the voice of the narrator, or for the sake of the story, the angel, alien, being, whatever you want it to be. But the distinction that's important is that one is of the world and the other is not. Into the darkness, again, down with the pigs and the pen, are the first words spoken on the album. And along with the descending sound on that opening track, they imply coming down into a new space, which we can perceive as the world. Other examples that back up this idea of one of the characters not being of the world are shoulder bound to the frame of a door, I am further than the sun, you stay, I go, dirt ain't nothing on me. And the other character that is portrayed by our narrator, if you will, resonates with ideas like the mist you've acquired, and they drown their wishes like their fathers before. They are our human in this story. They are the ones being romanced. The best comparison that I can make is think of A Christmas Carol. The human in the story is Ebenezer Scrooge, and the narrator in the story is the ghost of Christmas past. This distinction is important to make not because it alters your perception of the album, but because it allows you to follow the spark. I don't care what name you put to the characters, just that you see that there's two opposing ways of dealing with the pain that they see in this world. One retreats and one reacts. I remember vividly a Christmas maybe 5 or so years ago where one of our lifelong neighbors passed away, leaving behind his family and specifically his wife, who is still our neighbor to this day. I never knew much about them, but I could see that they lived a long and committed life to each other. And I knew that every time I interacted with them, they led with love and kindness. Like I said, it was around Christmas, so my mom was really aware to the fact that this would be our first holiday without her husband. So she set aside a card and some baking, and she asked me to go drop it off for her. And I'm not sure what was going through my head at this time, but I remember staring blankly at these items. I had only been asked to leave them at the door, but for some reason, I was paralyzed at the idea of this. How hard was it just to leave this at her doorstep, I asked myself. But what if she saw me? What would I say to her? Were the questions that followed after the first. I hated myself for the fact that I couldn't do it, because I couldn't understand what was making me feel so uncomfortable. But with time, I realized in that moment what I was really experiencing was a complete understanding that there was not one word I could say to her that would make a difference. And it made me feel useless. I felt like an idiot. In the face of pain, I felt powerless. So I retreated. This is one of the responses that we see exemplified on this album. The song Desire sings vividly about a person who is drowning themselves in what they think is going to fulfill them. Deep they've designed you from cradle to pyre. It's so hard to find you, the mist you've acquired, has you turned to a liar. And following that, we get the narrator's perspective. I see them driving into nothing where nothing is sure. They drown their wishes in the fountain like their fathers before. As I sit longer with this question of What do we do with pain once we experience the rude awakening that no one is sheltered from it? I see that quite often I take this route of denial, of naivety, and I don't do it proudly, but I know it to be true about myself. Navigating pain is not easy in any sense. It's not easy to navigate it yourself, and it's not easy to watch the people you love navigate it. And in many ways, denial is a natural response to pain, especially pain that is unchangeable. Denial is defined by Cambridge Dictionary as an unwillingness to accept that something unpleasant is true. Through the eyes of denial, we see pain as something that we will never be able to control. So we choose to ignore it completely so that its effects don't alter our state of joy. But I hate to be the bearer of bad news, especially to myself. But if denial is our only route in life, we will end up missing out on a lot. And the effects of not dealing with it could lead us to emotional stagnation and possibly even the lack of deep and meaningful relationships due to the fact that when someone really needs us, our instinct is to run. I think my main issue when facing pain is that I feel powerless. If I can't take away their pain, then I've failed them, is the thought spinning around in my head. But with that logic, I forget that life moves on. The truth is that I can't change the past, but I can always improve the future. All I can do is choose to stay and to love despite the pain, which leads me to believe that love is the word that makes the world go round. We just can't be passive in our belief of that. It takes action and awareness to love in the face of pain, or in the words of the song Desire, the change requires desire. Anger, like denial, is another emotion that we hold a lot of negative connotations to. And for many reasons, like the destruction it can cause, is probably for good reason. But anger is often misunderstood. Anger is only a cover for other emotions. It is a form of trying to reframe our pain so that we feel like we have control over it. Anger is defined by Cambridge Dictionary as a strong feeling that makes you want to hurt someone or be unpleasant because of something unfair or unkind that has happened. What stands out to me in Psychology Today's article on anger is this. Anger is often a reaction to and distraction from inner suffering, feelings such as sadness, powerlessness, shame, anxiety, inadequacy, and isolation. Something that we can all relate to. If we look at the album through the eyes of our narrator, we will be met with lyrics like this. To be anesthetized and crave emotion, so beautiful to hurt so well. Or, as long as I've known, there's no feeling to draw. There's this focus of anger towards the world, but hope towards the human. On the last track, Favorite, we hear the words, I could claim the dreamer from the dream. The goal of the narrator is to wake you up, to show you the ways in which you're being romanced. And it could never be clearer than on Death Kink when they say, when will you step in the room out of your head? But there is one song in particular where the narrator really gives us the opportunity to see his perspective. And it just so happens to be the second least streamed song on the album, Motorcycle Boy. Now I'll be honest, Motorcycle Boy isn't one that really hit me until I went in to dissect this album and write this episode. But its contribution to the album as a whole has immensely changed my perspective, and here's why. One verse in particular reads out, and sinner shows emotion, provokes them to hang. People stood in silence. When they tied him, they sang. Drowned him in the crowd swells, and church bells, they rang. No one wants their madness. They start to understand. It's fine, I know. You rain, I snow. You stay, I'll go. Like many Fontaine's lyrics, they are graphic and blunt, and of course, your interpretation of them is up to you, but here's how I see it. In this dystopian style world that this album has created, your place in it is determined by who you align yourself with. And there's not one right and one wrong because, as we talked about earlier, both sides are lost. You see, the sinner seems like the person who should be in the wrong at first glance because they are given the label sinner. But all that we know about them is that they showed emotion. And showing emotion isn't a sin. But in the face of a world who is in denial to the truth, then it is surely a place that you would be exiled for doing so. With this perspective, all of the sudden, the audience becomes the bad guys. They're the ones blindly celebrating the death of another person. But if the audience is of this world, if the audience is being romanced, then they know no better. Not until they realize no one wants their madness, they start to understand. Not until they realize that they too are only one move away from being on the other side of the audience. This is a really big moment in the album for me where you get this switch. You're not listening to either side trying to convince you to join them, trying to convince you to indulge in your vices, or trying to convince you to hate everyone else that does. But instead you get to see both, and then you're given the option to choose for yourself. Again, you choose or you exist. I think the truth is we are both the sinner and the audience at one point in our lives. Like I said earlier, I often find myself retreating from pain, but there has been moments where I look to anger for my answers. The only thing that has come of both of them is that in the face of pain, I am still lost. Something that I almost missed while writing this episode was the deluxe release of this album. On it are 3 additional songs, and one in particular is a second version of Starburster, and it's titled Starburster / In Heaven, The Lady in the Radiator. At first glance, you might think it's Starburster 2.0, just slightly slower and different production, until you hear Green begin the song with a chorus that never appears on the original version. He repeats, "In heaven, everything is fine." And this change, along with a softer approach to the song, reframes the way we hear all the I statements. I want to see you alone. I want to shape the stone. I want to bounce the bone. I want to mess with it. I want to lay the defile. I want to talk with the clown who his apologies down. I want to bite the phone. I want to bleed the tone. I want to see you alone. And so on and so on. On the initial release of Starburster, these lyrics are sung with such conviction that makes you feel like the character believes they deserve to receive them. I want this, I want that, is embodied into all of these things I desire, I will acquire at any cost. Hence the lyrics, I'm gonna hit your business if it's momentary blissness. In this second version, however, the I statements feel more like a wish of hope. They don't feel like they're entitled to those things. Which then shows us, just like there's a difference between love and romance, there is also a difference between desire and hope. So then what do we do? How do we answer the question, who do I become in the face of pain? I think that all I can offer you is a starting place, and that starting place is to do the opposite of what feels natural to you. If running is your way of coping, then stand still. Challenge yourself to show up for someone or to show up for yourself, and then see what happens. If anger is your way of coping, then search for peace. Find practical ways to serve people that need help, rather than focusing on what's wrong in the world. You know, there probably is not one solid answer when it comes to the question, what do you do when you become aware of the pain of the world? But there is always something that we can do. In an interview, Carlos said, "Favorite is last because it leaves the album on a note that allows you to believe that you can have those hard moments and still experience hope." For me, it comes down to love being the only thing I can offer someone in their deepest moments of pain. What do I say when I have to look someone that I love in the eyes after they've lost someone so important to them? What can I do other than love them? I struggled a lot in writing this episode, because it forced me to exist in a place where I was constantly contemplating the pain I've went through and the pain I've watched people go through and the pain that I've seen strangers go through. Trying to answer this question didn't bring me peace, and it didn't feel good. As you come out of the place of being romanced or being numb, you will see so much hurt and you won't have an explanation for it. You'll find yourself saying, "But it's not fair," as if you were 8 years old again, pleading your case to your parents that you should be allowed to stay up as late as your sibling. But this time, it'll mean so much more. But I think as we get older, it's important for us to move past this idea that we have control over fairness. And rather than focusing on everything that's wrong, we simply choose to love. There was many moments I wanted to scrap this entire video, but I had this nagging voice inside of my head saying, "Push in further. You will do no good if you walk away from this feeling." There you can see where the denial was trying to creep into my actions, but I'm not going to listen to it. So today I'm choosing to stand still. I'm choosing to let this be a conversation without a conclusion. The way I see it is that we have one choice to make. We can either stay stuck in our denial and our anger, or we can search for a better way to live. Underneath all the thundering, there is magic, and if there's a better way to live, I've got to have it. Ultimately, I also think I don't have enough years behind me to really answer this question. I'd hope that if I come back to this video in 50 or even 10 years that I would have a better answer for you. I'd hope that I'd changed and grown. But honestly, in a world that tells you that you need to know exactly who you are and always be ready to present it, I think it's good that we practice just saying, "I am not sure," because that is the only way in which we learn. And maybe I read that in some book or an old packet of smokes. Who knows? As always, all social media and sources are in the show notes. Let's let music bring us together, and don't forget to grow up slowly.